means letting the particular flavor, the particular shimmering quality of that person register fully with us. It's a way of, we go out to meet them, but we also open to receive them. And that's right, the Bhagavad-gita is sort of somehow something of both of these. We allow how they are to be present with us. We could never really say, I know what you feel. That's a bit colonial in some way. But we can certainly be with them. So that's the nakedness of the mind. I'm not projecting onto them. I'm not trying to fit them into some interpretive template. Then thirdly, we have congruence. Congruence means maintaining, from this particular way of describing it, congruence would mean staying balanced in the middle, not following into a confluence, a merging with the other person. So I'm not just sort of out there in them, nor am I back in my own thoughts, judging and thinking about them, but I'm with them in the beat, so that I arise to meet the other person for the other person. You know, it's like if you've had a bad day at work and you come home and you get into a fight with your partner or friend, you're displacing something that doesn't really belong there. So the more naked, the more open and fresh we are, we won't have these displacements. Sufficient unto the day becomes sufficient unto the moment. If we are fully in the moment, then when that moment's gone, it's gone. But we haven't retroflected, we haven't swallowed our words, we haven't repressed, we've just been there. And we've met the moment with the energy the moment required. Not too much, not too little. That's a wonderful feeling, isn't it? You know, sometimes you can really get a good heart-to-heart chat with a friend and you feel really met and they're energized, and it's something very beautiful. So the possibility of meditation is to support that availability into the field, meeting it without agenda, but with the finesse of being fully attuned to what's there. Yeah. Okay, so it's time for lunch. Look a little bit more at some of the clinical implications. Clearly this is a practice which the therapist can use to support their practice. It's also something that you can encourage a client to use as well. If we go back to some of the kind of well-known statements about therapy, Bion talked about the analyst being without memory or desire. So memory links us to the past, desire links us to the future. If you can just stay open to whatever's there, then from that point of view it's more helpful. Because it's the introduction of the agenda, which tends to be an ego agenda, which can pull the therapy back to the very sort of surface level of kind of trading stories, and can block something else being opened up, whether you think of that as the unconscious or a state of natural awareness. It also, of course, links with Freud's notion of encouraging the patient towards free association. That is to say, not editing or blocking what they say, but allowing it to flow out of them, with the parallel function in the analyst of maintaining a free-floating attention, so that the analyst is not moving towards pulling their attention towards something which seems particularly interesting, but rather is giving an equal attention to everything that arises. And that's a very interesting idea, isn't it? That we have our prejudice, we have our sense of what is meaningful. And if we take that into the engagement with the other, then we're going to be privileging the things which take our fancy and underprivileging the things which don't. It may well be that we're in an alliance with the patient in that we both are drawn towards something. Maybe they had a good weekend and they managed to sit down with their partner and talk through some issue, and kind of want to celebrate that with them, and that seems very meaningful. But they're talking about how, because of that, on Sunday, I didn't bother going around to see my mum, and that goes on. Well, that might be something very significant as well. But our attention has already been drawn to something which we've given a particular reading to. So a free-floating attention would allow the registering of everything that's there, as it were, as it is, without our interference, with the idea that the less prejudice or editing or interference is coming from the therapist's side, there's more space for the client to feel a true welcome, a true sense of the other being available. And through the experience that the other is available to me in a non-judgmental way, I can start to be available to myself in a non-judgmental way, which means I can start to be curious about what's going on. So say, for example, I have lots of things in myself that I don't like, things that I'm annoyed about or seem to thwart me, things which represent my life not being the way I feel it should be. That experience, which is not at all uncommon, seems to lead often in two directions. One is I'll try to avoid thinking about these things, and so I don't work on changing them. And the other is when I do find myself thinking about them, it's with irritation and a sort of blocking towards the possibility that there might be something of value in there. So the idea of a free-floating attention, which allows an equal registering, is actually the basis for open curiosity. And curiosity allows us to put things into question. And when we put them into question, they have a space to show not their closed, compacted form, but they get sort of teased out, opened out, like a bud opening into a flower, where we start to see the different flavors that are condensed inside the thing that we've been battering down to keep it as a definite proposition. Oh, I hate the way I do that. I can't bear it. And it's kind of beyond examination, because I already know what's there. And so why would I want to keep looking at something that really annoys me? So free-floating attention can help to open that foreclosure into being relaxed, at ease, and just seeing what's there. That's greatly helped if we can have a disidentification. That I'm not going to find out something horrible about me, I'm going to find out what's there in my mind. So if I, as it were, appropriated my mind, if I've planted my flag on all the phenomena which arise as my experience, what am I going to do when some of it seems horrible? Whereas if I take the flag out and just say, this is the field of experience, rather than this is my experience, and my experience is showing me, it's rather, this is what is revealed to me at this moment, in this day. How strange. Weird. How come this is happening? If I say, how come it's happening to me, I'm again moving back to my definition about myself. How weird that it's happening. Then, if you hold that, then it's easier to think, weird shit happens. Weird. Okay, so some weird stuff is going on. Let's see what it is. Now I can see it without feeling that it's an X-ray of my soul. It has something to do with me, or rather, I have something to do with it in terms of how I'm getting connected with it, but now I could start to have some choices. So perhaps you can see there how there's a gentle teasing out of that propositional condensation in which I arrive with knowledge of who I am, what I can accept and what I can't accept. So in the first instance, the question would be, for when we're working with other people, how do we want to position ourselves? Now, we have lives. Probably in our lives things don't always go well. You might turn up to see someone and be feeling awful. Bad things could be happening in your family or with yourself, in a relationship, and you don't feel available. Actually, I'm not available. And yet I have to be available. What do we do then? We can split ourselves and go into almost a kind of false self-adaptation. I'll get in role, I'm going to squeeze myself into this and be the professional. But there's the alienation involved in that, the displacement from one's true feelings, means that all this, the kind of receptors in your belly are being closed down. You've got to shut that down. So you're now operating up here, making sense of what's going on in a sort of disembodied cognitive way, which is probably not very helpful. The possibility in doing the practice, especially the one we did just before the break, is just sitting, open, and there's stuff. There's space for all the stuff. There's space for two reasons. One, that in that state, the centered point of control of the ego, of I, me, myself, is relaxed. And secondly, the stuff is always moving, so it doesn't go into a log jam. It just keeps flowing. No matter how it is, it'll soon be gone. In the tradition that's called the self-liberation of all phenomena, that whatever occurs goes free by itself, because it's always dynamic. And when we get interfering with it, trying to hang on to it if we like it, trying to push it away if we don't like it, that effort's not going to work, because the contents of the mind are always changing. So you can't hang on to the good things except by thinking about them again and again and again, in which case you're working with the impermanence. And you don't have to push them away, because if you relax the involvement, they'll go free. This is one of the main principles that is now in pain clinics. You know, when people have chronic pain, chronic back pain, they often feel incredibly persecuted. You wake up in the morning and it's the same bloody pain as yesterday, all day long. I have nothing to look forward to. It never leaves me alone. And people are often talking in a very concretized way about it. This bloody pain. So now there is a person, a vulnerable person, who's found their life reduced by this thing which has got them, like some demon that's got its claws in them. In the clinics now, more and more, people are encouraged to, in a sense, befriend their pain, to start to hang out with the pain and get to know the pain in a very simple way, relaxing the diaphragm, slow deep breathing, and just being present with what is arising. And the pain starts to show itself as having nuances, that sometimes it's stabbing, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's dull, sometimes it's almost vanished, sometimes it's incredibly intense. Once you get used to the actual phenomenological presentation of the pain, and you really see it, you see there isn't such a thing as the pain. What you have is flowing moments of experience with many, many different colors or tones or qualities. Therefore, it's not a thing that keeps battering you, but rather it's a kind of movement within yourself, which sometimes is dominating the scene and sometimes not. So in a sense it would be like a mum with a 3-year-old. If the 3-year-old's got a lot of energy and they're running around, the woman is only a mum. She hasn't got any space to be anything else. And then sometimes a 3-year-old gets down on the carpet and they're playing about and they're in something, and then for 5 minutes mum can kind of just let them get on with it and has a bit of mental space to come back to themselves. And that little break, short as it is, often, you know, for many mothers, lets them feel less fraught, less overwhelmed. They come back to being themselves. And then they can re-engage in the demanding role of being a mum. So it's a similar sort of thing with the pain. When its seemingly continuous flavour is revealed as being variation, then the subject can have variation in relation to it. And it's exactly the same with depression and anxiety. Conceptually, if the person has, as it were, had it for a long time, they build up the conception, I can't bear this depression, I get it every year, it lasts for 2 or 3 months, and it just kills me, it wraps itself around me, and so on. We're used to these sort of stories. When we actually look into the course of that experience in the flow of hours through the day, sometimes it's very dark and enveloping, sometimes it seems to be the absolute core definition of the person, and sometimes not. So maybe they had a phone call with someone in the afternoon, and their friend was telling them something, and they got caught up in that. And for that period of time, they weren't depressed. Now, what does that mean? Is that a moment of forgetfulness that I am actually depressed? It doesn't really help. Yeah, of course I felt a bit better, but look at me now. Hasn't done anything. Well, of course we can, with our sense of their suffering, we can feel, that's shitty. Because it is as if the person has been wrapped inside that, and they had a little pleasant sleep for 10 minutes on the phone, but they've woken back to the horror of being in this prison. But is that actually the case? Because while they were on the phone, something else was happening. If that something elseness can be really attended to, there is an actual interruption to the depression. So there were moods of, excuse me, there were feeling tones of depression wrapped in the narrative of depression. There was this intermission, and then there's the continuity of the feeling of depression. And it feels like a continuity, because the narrative of depression has gone across this gap like a bridge. And because we tend to be caught up in the narratives about ourselves, it gives the felt sense it's always like this. So there's a phenomenological blindness embedded in our intoxication by the narratives, the stories we tell about ourselves. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So helping people to attend to how things actually are and value it as actual lived experience. This is this. It's undeniable. You can't just sort of stick it in your pocket and say it's nothing at all. It happened. There was a gap. Look into the gap. The gap is different. If you value the gap, and you also value the experience of feeling hopeless and useless, you now have 2 experiences. Sometimes I feel like this, sometimes I feel like that. Then of course you can use your therapeutic skills. You could maybe do some empty chair work, have the depressed self speak to the self that was alive and connected. And in that way you give more shape to the depressed self as being a position or a place that I go to, and when I'm in that position, this is how the world feels, and when I'm in this other position, this is how it feels. And in that way the enveloping inside the sense of the continuity of experience seems to be the same. So maybe take a few minutes and just talk to the person next to you and think of any situation you're involved in, either for yourself or someone you're working with, where you can see how the sense of the story that you're in can cover moments which are different. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe try that for 5 minutes or so.
There are 3, are we? Well, I was going to be all right, then you can.
Okay.
So it's something about looking for
when you wake up in the morning.
I've only seen one.